Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Canales Virriel, Technical Specialist of the Procurement Division for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Program. In this pre-statement of qualifications, SOQ, meeting, we are going to explain the process for the CDBG-DRMIT-RFQ-2023-01 request for qualifications, inspection services for CDBG-DR, CDBG-MIT, CDBG-DR earthquakes, and CDBG-DR electrical system enhancements programs. I would like to introduce the team from the PRDOH. Along with me is Gabriela Cabrera, Procurement Official, Marisabel Rodriguez from the Infrastructure Division, and Jorge Maldonado from the Federal Compliance Area. Also, Aldo Rivera. Any questions submitted in this meeting will be answered in writing and will be published in an addendum. Any information provided in this meeting does not change the terms and conditions established in the request for qualifications or RFQ instructions. All procurement processes shall be conducted in accordance with the terms and conditions established in the procurement manual for the CDBG-DR to guarantee full and open competition or fair treatment of all persons or entities involved in each procurement process. The procurement manual is available at the CDBG-DR.pr.gov and is incorporated by reference and made an integral part of this RFQ. Nothing said at the pre-SOQ meeting will change any of the terms of the RFQ except a written amendment to the solicitation issued through an addendum. Now, we will have a presentation from Marisabel Rodriguez from the Infrastructure Division explaining the scope of services for this process.
Good morning to all. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here today. This morning, I will emphasize on two of the programs, CDBG Disaster Recovery or DR and the CDBG mitigation programs. Both programs have action plans written, which you can find under the PRDOH's portal for further information.
Marisabel, can you please share your presentation, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Here we go. Okay. As I was mentioning, I will be talking about these two programs, and you can find specific information about those programs in PRDOH's website. In terms of the participating programs, I would like to just go into just briefly explaining what the programs entail, each of the programs entails. The CDBG Disaster Recovery Program addresses unmet needs related to major disaster declarations in order to provide long-term recovery alternatives for the territory. It also provides housing, infrastructure, and economic development aid to communities through different programs that allow prompt, resilient recovery from damages and economic burdens resulting from Hurricanes Irma and Maria, specifically in urban centers along the entire island. Funded activities under CDBG-DR must meet a national objective and demonstrate a tie to the storms. That is, it needs to address the LMI or low to moderate income population and issues of urban blight, as well as demonstrate the tie to the storms, Irma and Maria. In terms of the CDBG mitigation program, it varies a little bit in that it addresses mitigation needs by improving the built environment in order to mitigate hazardous threats. It intends to empower applicants or entities to identify risks and develop solutions to mitigate risk to infrastructure assets through innovative, eco-conscious, and self-sustaining solutions. And perhaps most importantly, or perhaps an issue to be stressed here, underlined, is the fact that CDBG mitigation intends to implement strategic, transformative, and high-impact projects that will strengthen the island's resilience to future disasters by reducing risks attributable to natural disasters, addressing repetitive property loss, and improving critical infrastructure. So that's a very important aspect to consider for this program. In terms of participating entities, both programs consider PRDOH, that is the Puerto Rico Department of Housing, or any other eligible entity currently participating through an agreement or that will participate through an agreement with PRDOH to implement projects from the Disaster Recovery Programs portfolio or the mitigations portfolio, okay? Also, it considers entities identified above that may require the acquisition of inspection services related to the implementation of eligible disasters recovery projects and eligible mitigation projects. This request for qualifications for inspection services intends to ascertain those providers that are able or capable to provide the following inspection services: performing site visits, let me go back, inspection services before construction and inspection services during construction. In the line item of services prior to construction, that entity would perform site visits of the project and prepare original site conditions reports prior to any construction activity. It would participate in initial meetings to establish communication strategies with construction management prior to the beginning of construction or any construction activity. It would verify that contractors have all required endorsements, insurances, permits, policies, and all similar documentation, inclusive of HR payroll requirements. Also would verify the release of funds was obtained as they relate to the environmental review procedure for entities assuming HUD environmental responsibilities in compliance with federal NEPA regulations. And I should underscore that this is of utmost importance during or prior to commencing work, construction work. In terms of the inspection services needed during construction, we would need for that entity or for those entities to observe and monitor the work performed by the contractor and coordinate project activities in order to complete projects within the established time frame, budget, and quality. Monitor that all required endorsements, insurances, permits, policies, and all similar documentation are not expired. Manage field test result reports and coordinate any necessary actions. Document and fill all project information, inclusive of instructions from owner, construction management, and contractor, while keeping evidence of all activities performed. This for the particular or the specific projects, I should say. In addition, the services required to evaluate proposals, schedules, submittals, and negotiating change orders in coordination with construction management, analyze and recommend claims for time extensions, prepare time analysis to determine those time extensions, direct and coordinate the acceptance and delivery of the project, including all documentation, as well as permits necessary for the use of the project. And last but not least, prepare and sign off all required inspection documentation. Additional construction-related specialized services might be included in the sense of performing, analyzing, or reporting specific testing regarding the subsequent areas: geotechnical work, surveying, structural, electrical, plumbing, environmental, landscape architectural work as required by the projects. In terms of staff requirements, in essence, there will be two figures: a designated inspector and an engineer or architect in training, or landscape architect in training, as may be the case for the work that needs to be performed. The main figure would be that of the designated inspector, which needs to be a professional registered architect or engineer in Puerto Rico. Needs to be an active member of the Colegio de Arquitectos y Arquitectos Paisajistas or the Colegio de Ingenieros y Agrimensores de Puerto Rico. Must have a minimum of 3 years experience in design, construction, and or as a designated inspector, and experience and knowledge in construction codes, design, construction, and project management. In terms of the role of the engineer or the architect in training, these two individuals would serve under the designated inspector. And again, they need to be active members of both the College of Architects, Landscape Architects, and the College of Engineers and Landscape and Land Surveyors of Puerto Rico. Have an active registration in the Department of State of Puerto Rico. Have a minimum of 3 years experience in the construction industry, and must be practicing under the direction of the designated inspector, as I explained before. If qualified, the respondent is selected and awarded will have the following required specialized services staff available and in compliance with the established requirements described in the scope of services: structural engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers. And that's all I have at the moment. Appreciate your time, and I hope that you all are able to participate, and I wish you all luck in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisabel, for that information. Now we will be discussing the submission requirements. For these RFQ documents are available for download at the CDBG-DR website that my peer told us later on. The important dates for this RFQ are the submission for questions and requests for clarification on June 28, 2023 at 4 p.m. Responses to the questions and requests for clarifications will be answered July 6, 2023. The RFQ due dates, it's from July 17, 2023 at 9:30 a.m. up to July 19, 2023 at 4:30 p.m. Responses to the RFQ will only be accepted by an electronic means. The respondents will receive access to submit the electronic statement of qualifications after the registration process through the CDBG-DR website. Once the scheduled submission period begins, a link will be enabled access to the registration form. Please complete all required fields in this form. Statement of qualifications must be submitted within the closing date and time schedule. Access to upload the electronic statement of qualifications will commence 3 business days before the scheduled due dates. The evaluation committee will evaluate responses statement of qualifications in accordance with the criteria listed. A narrative description of the respondents' overall understanding of the goals and requirements of the CDBG-DR, CDBG-MIT, CDBG-DR Earthquake, and CDBG-DR Electric System Enhancement Programs, Explain how the respondent will work in coordination with the subrecipients and PRDOH to provide those services. Explain how the respondents will conduct all inspection services at all phases of the construction project while tracking and enforcing general contractors' work quality. Additionally, they will have to explain how the respondents will coordinate with the stakeholders and contractors to perform all tasks related to environmental studies, evaluation, monitoring, and assessment that are needed to complete all necessary tasks. Firm experience and qualifications with relevant projects will also be evaluated. Firm experience with federally funded projects. Additionally, the respondent's ability to adequately staff and scale all positions required to maintain the agreed upon services, deliverables, and timelines. And last but not least, the respondents must submit a list with the general information of any person intended to be used and, if applicable, any entity to be used as a subcontractor. Now, I will leave you with my peer, Karen Canales, for additional submission requirements.
The respondent and first-year subcontractor must be registered in the System for Award Management, or SAM, better known as SAM, at the time of the proposal submission, or initiate the registration process right after the proposal submission. For more information, please visit the SAM website, sam.gov. There is no fee to create, renew, update your registration. Awards will only be issued to entities that are cleared and not ineligible for award of a contract due to suspension, debarment, or HUD-imposed limited denial of participation. Now, we will have a presentation from Jorge Maldonado from the Federal Compliance Area or Division with an introduction to the Section 3 and MWBE business. Thank you.
Greetings to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the space to present compliance and labor standards requirements. This presentation is prepared in English. However, should anyone need this presentation in Spanish, you can request using the protocols for this RFP. I am representing the Department of Housing Federal Compliance team, led by Maria del Carmen Figueroa. Today, we will discuss as part of our agenda an overview of compliance roles and responsibilities. We will also cover some tools that are available online. We will also talk about documenting efforts, taking advantage of training that's made available, and reporting requirements, as well as frequently asked questions. In this presentation, we will be discussing Section 3 training, hiring, and contracting opportunities, minority and women-owned business participation, and fair housing and equal opportunity. Contractors or subrecipients using CDBG-DR or CDBG-MIT funding have certain roles and responsibilities. These include assigning staff who will attend the day-to-day implementation of federal compliance requirements, attending trainings and workshops, using tools and templates, executing the activities, and completing documentation that's required. You can also participate in Department of Housing sponsored technical assistance sessions. You must complete quarterly reporting and comply with the reporting requirements. The procurement package contains language that offers contractors the ability to seek a preference. Please remember to use the references and templates that are made available and that we will be discussing in this presentation. Proposers seeking preference should provide their self-certifications and sufficient evidence for how they qualify as a Section 3 business. The Department of Housing offers a template on the website. Proposers seeking MWBE preference should provide a copy of their certification and evidence of their status. The certificates provided should show the dates and indicate that they are currently active. The procurement package contains sections that speak to the applicability and the requirements for MWBE. Within those sections, you will find helpful links to online resources that are made available, such as the policy guide. Let's talk about Section 3. Section 3 is a federal requirement from the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1968. This requirement states that we should provide, to the greatest extent feasible, job training, employment, contracting, and other economic opportunities generated by this HUD financial assistance to be directed to low and very low income persons and businesses. The Department of Housing makes available a Section 3 policy guide on their website, both in English and in Spanish. Contractors must read and implement activities as applicable and necessary. They also are responsible for their subcontractors assuring that benchmarks are met. For Section 3 projects, 24 CFR 75 has established the following benchmarks. 25% of the total labor hours for a project should be work hours of Section 3 workers. And from that 25%, 5% of the total labor hours should be work hours of targeted Section 3 workers. Let's talk about the definition of a Section 3 business. A Section 3 business refers to a business concern meeting at least one of the following criteria, which is documented within the last 6 months. The business is at least 51% owned and controlled by low or very low income persons. It could also be a business that has at least 51% ownership and controlled by a public housing resident or residents who currently live in Section 8 assisted housing. It could also be a business that has over 75% of the labor hours performed for that business over the prior 3-month period by Section 3 workers. In this slide, we're going to look at the definition of a Section 3 worker. A Section 3 worker can be any worker who fits or, when hired within the last 5 years, fit at least one of the following categories. The worker's income for the previous or annualized calendar year is below the income limit established by HUD. It could also be a worker who is employed by a Section 3 business concern. Or the worker is a youth build participant. Now let's talk about what a targeted Section 3 worker is. A Section 3 targeted worker for community development financial assistance projects is a person who is employed by a Section 3 business. It could also be a person who currently fits or when hired fit at least one of the following categories as documented within the past 5 years. Someone living within the service area or the neighborhood of the project as defined in 24 CFR 75.5, or a youth build participant. The neighborhood or service area for a targeted Section 3 worker is that in which you can find at least 5,000 persons within a 1-mile radius of the project. If there are less than 5,000 persons within that 1-mile radius, you can expand that radius until you have 5,000 persons around the Section 3 covered project site. Each year, HUD releases new income limits. These income limits typically come out around April. The latest income limits for 2022 are made available on the slide. The Department of Housing has created various forms for helping maintain compliance. There is a Section 3 plan that can be used by contractors or subrecipients. There are also Section 3 self-certification forms. And finally, there is a form to help you document your efforts. Let's take a closer look at your Section 3 plan. This document helps you identify new hiring needs, subcontracting needs. It helps you plan your outreach efforts and assists your coordinators in identifying the day-to-day activities. It helps you define compliant procedures and it helps you understand your reporting requirements. You can use the link on the slide to visit the website and download a Section 3 plan template. In this slide, we want to focus on the Section 3 self-certification forms. These useful tools help you uncover if workers or subcontracting businesses meet the income thresholds required. HUD offers also a business registry. This registry allows you to register yourself as a Section 3 business. The registry also has a tool that helps serve folks looking for Section 3 business databases. We will now turn our attention to minority and women-owned business compliance. There are various regulations that call for the inclusion of minorities and women business enterprises. 2 CFR 200.321, as well as Executive Orders 11625, 12138, and 12432 establish the participation of MWBE firms, which seek to ensure that when possible, contracts and other economic opportunities funded in whole or in part with federal housing and community development assistance are directed to minority business enterprises and women business enterprises. The Department of Housing has established an MWBE policy guide. This is available on the website in both English and Spanish. You can access those documents using the link on the slide. Let's look at what a minority business enterprise is. An MBE is defined as a business which is at least 51% owned, operated, and controlled on a daily basis by one or more American citizens of the following ethnic minority and/or gender and/or military veteran classifications: African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, Native American, Hasidic Jew, persons with disabilities, and other individuals who can prove social and economic disadvantage. Women business enterprises, or WBEs, are businesses that are at least 51% owned and controlled by one or more women. The owners must be U.S. citizens or legal resident aliens whose business formation and principal place of business are here in the U.S. or its territories, and whose management and daily operation is controlled by women. The MWBE policy guide will identify that there are goals which apply to professional services, purchasing supplies, and construction contracting. There is a total of 20% minimum participation goal. This 20% is comprised of 10% for women-owned businesses and 10% for minority-owned businesses. Contractors are expected to perform good faith efforts for contracting, subcontracting, and purchasing opportunities. The Department of Housing has also created various forms for helping maintain compliance with MWBE. One of those is the MWBE Utilization Plan. This document template allows contractors or subrecipients to identify how they plan on being in compliance with these contracting goals. There is also a waiver form. This document allows contractors or subrecipients to identify if they meet the requirements to waive their goals for MWBE. Let's look at the MWBE Utilization Plan. This tool helps you compile data for your subcontracting. It helps you identify what needs you may have. It helps hold discussions on creating supplier and contractor listings, and it provides awareness of meeting the goal for the contract and tracking. You can use the link on the slide to go to the website and download the plan template. Let's review how you should complete your MWBE Utilization Plan. The Department of Housing Utilization Plan template can be used throughout the life cycle of your contract. Completing the plan is pretty easy. You should read the general instructions in row 3 and complete sections A, B, and F from the document. Complete the information requested in the yellow cells. When we talk about certified minority or women-owned businesses, we are referring to those who have filed applications with federal entities such as SBA and others that you see here on the slide. Businesses who are certified can provide proof of completing an application process to be officially recognized as a certified minority or women-owned business. If you are registered as an MWBE, you should provide your valid certificate or other evidence in response to this RFP. In this section, we will be discussing how to complete your efforts in quarterly reporting. In order for you to report your efforts, the Department of Housing provides a tool. This tool helps you document and identify how often you are seeking interactions with Section 3 businesses and MWBE businesses. The quarterly reporting form allows for you to share and report your data with the Department of Housing. This allows the agency to fulfill oversight responsibilities and monitor the progress throughout the year. The Department of Housing's quarterly reporting form allows for the user to capture multiple compliance areas all in one Excel form. Section 3 data is collected. MWBE data is collected as well. FHEO information is also documented within the report. And finally, for those who have construction projects, there is a report for Davis-Bacon Unfound Workers Efforts Reporting. Awarded contractors will be responsible for reporting 4 times a year, on April 5th, July 5th, October 5th, and January 5th. This ensures that you are meeting benchmarks and documenting your efforts. The quarterly reporting template is also available on the Department of Housing website. Let's briefly discuss FHEO. Your RFP package will also contain a model contract which outlines fair housing and equal opportunity areas of compliance. Contractors are responsible for ensuring compliance with federal civil rights and fair housing through their contractors, subcontractors, and so forth, ensuring that all necessary efforts are being made. The Fair Housing Act and Sections 109 and 504 prohibit discrimination against the following protected classes of people: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, age, familial status, disability, gender identity, and sexual orientation. The Fair Housing Act is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There are many executive orders, laws, and statutes that govern the non-discrimination of protected classes to ensure equal opportunity for individuals in accessing federally funded programs. Equal opportunity is afforded to protected classes through a number of these federal laws and executive orders. The Department of Housing has published policy documents attending FHEO as well as Language Access Plan. These policies must be implemented by contractors and subrecipients. They are publicly available online in both English and Spanish. You are encouraged to click on the links and access the resources available. As a recipient of HUD financial assistance, the Department of Housing must ensure that all programs affirmatively further access to fair housing and that the programs provide equal opportunity for participation and employment. Reasonable accommodations are changes made to policies, practices, services, and structures or modifications to afford equal opportunity to individuals with disabilities. The costs associated with providing reasonable accommodations and modifications are to be incurred by programs receiving federal funding. HUD contemplates these additional costs as necessary to ensure that the programs and activities it funds do not discriminate against people with disabilities. The slide contains a link for you to access the reasonable accommodation page on the Department of Housing website. Limited English proficiency refers to a person's limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English. Due to Puerto Rico's high Spanish-speaking population, all entities and contractors using the CDBG-DR funding must seek to ensure that both a person's limited ability to read, write, speak, or understand English or Spanish will not place them at a disadvantage in the participation of programs. let's briefly discuss some common, frequently asked questions. Can a business be both Section 3 and MWBE? The answer is yes. A business or a contractor can be both because these compliance areas are actually separate. Section 3 identifies the level of incomes to determine the status. MWBE uses race and gender information to qualify a business. If I am not planning on subcontracting, do I still need to complete documents? The answer is yes. You should still submit your MWBE utilization plan, the documentation of efforts template, and your quarterly reports. If Section 3 doesn't apply to my contract, do I still have to complete the quarterly report? The answer is yes. You will have to complete the MWBE portion of the report and the portion of the report that attends to FHEO. If I'm either an MBE or WBE, do I fulfill the total goals? You may have safe harbor for one of the goals for MWBE participation of 10%, but you will still have an additional 10% goal to show good faith efforts for any subcontracting or purchasing you perform with the CDBG-DR and CDBG-MIT funding. What happens if I don't fulfill the goals before the end of my contract? All awarded contractors should perform and document their efforts. The Department of Housing has developed templates discussed in this presentation that help you complete the exercise. You can submit a waiver before the end of your contract for approval. This waiver request should be submitted with the efforts and justification as appropriate. Procurement team, I'm handing over the presentation to you now.
Thank you, everybody, for your participation. Remember that all questions will be answered by an addendum. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.